Hello and welcome to another episode of Facepalm Moments of the Week. I know this is the second video I've done today. I'm really spoiling you guys. But again, with the holidays, I've got a lot going on and I wanted to make sure I get all the content that you guys expect or at least maybe look forward to. And so yes, Facepalm Moments on Tuesday as well as Get Smarter. Before we get going with the news stories, I also just wanted to say that it is my intention to show up for Steve Shive's patron hangout that's happening this Sunday, the 27th, I believe, which would be 6 o'clock my time. So if you can't get enough of me with my channel here, you can also look for me on Steve's channel, at least making a guest appearance, a short guest appearance. I guess other people will want to talk too. So I'll just be there in the background, chiming in as and when I can on his account and his Patreon hangout. And then I will also be doing something with Will Fox, who does political analysis. We're organizing a hangout before the end of this year. And there's also a possibility that I'm going to be doing a hangout with Kevin Logan still this week. So you're going to see a lot of me if you want. And the details for all of that stuff will be coming up. I guess, except for Steve's thing is definitely planned. So that's going to be on Sunday. And then as the other ones come up, if it's not going to be here on my channel, like if Will hosts it on his channel, Kevin and I, if we broadcast it, it's still a little bit up in the air, we're planning it out, I'll make an announcement so you know when and where you can watch that happen. Now for this week's episode, I have mostly facepalms and then some good news. Let's get going with that. And apologies that a lot of my news has been Ameri-centric lately. It's just because I've been quite busy in putting together the flashiest headlines, the ones that stand out, and for some reason, I don't really have to think that hard as to why Americans would have the most outrageous stories when it comes to the violation of the separation of church and state and the pushing of Christian privilege and expectations of special treatment. And if they don't get special treatment, they claim victimhood. So let's get going with the stories that I've put together for you for this week. Get to do my whole screen share. Woo, and then let's get over to my PowerPoint. Here we go. Ooh, sorry, I should have had this all set up for you before, but it's easier if I do it this way. All right, facepalm moments. Our first facepalm comes from the ever frustrating, ever shockingly stupid Sarah Palin, who opens her mouth and you just wait for stupidity to plop out. You're just like waiting for that turd gem where you can go, did she really say that? Did she really say that out loud? And this time her turd gem was, her position was the only time it would be suitable to vote for an atheist was if there's a Muslim candidate who wants to kill you. So from the article, and I'll just read this out, when it came to selecting candidates, Palin asserted that it was better to vote for someone with no faith in God than someone who worshipped Allah. Quote, oof, gosh, Palin stuttered at the idea of voting for an atheist. If it all came down to that versus someone who believed in a religion that was hell-bent on destroying those who didn't agree with their religion, who would literally want to kill the infidel who would not say, I would literally want to kill the infidel who would not say, okay, I would go along with you, then I would. I was trying to decide there if I screwed up that quote or if that's just Palin being entirely incoherent. So you can read that again out loud and see if it makes any sense. She went on to say, which means anyone who is sympathetic to what's going on today with Muslims, terrorists who would crucify children and behead women and stop at nothing to try to destroy us in Israel and our allies, I'd choose an atheist over that. And then it was Michael Smerconish that she was speaking to. He said, okay, you're voting for an atheist over an ISIS supporter. Palin replied, okay, gosh darn it, you made it too simple. The idea that patriotic, loyal Americans who don't believe in supernatural beings are somehow still not to be preferred to a religious Muslim unless that Muslim believer is actively advocating the murder of someone. Only that point would it be okay to vote for an atheist. Is the kind of bigotry that worldview entails shocks me. And it makes me think of that interview I did with Stephen Cattell, that he, coming from a European perspective, finds it shocking the kind of discrimination and bigotry that atheists in America face. And this open bigotry that atheists in American atheists faces it really is summed up by Sarah Palin, and it's entirely offensive. And if I'm honest, if we want to look at the teachings of Jesus, it's not at all Christian. Next story we have is by Jeffrey Taylor, and those of you who are longtime viewers of this program will know that I'm a fan of Jeffrey Taylor, and I often feature his stories. This last week he did a story about the David Silverman, who goes on Fox regularly as sort of the American atheist spokesperson. And I have to say, as a liberal, a progressive, and an atheist, I'm really disappointed that I don't see atheists better represented on even MSNBC, when there are so many issues of religious freedom and religious intolerance happening in the United States. They tend to bring on religious leaders, and they don't properly represent the religiously unaffiliated. So I think that's an area where we could, as an atheist group, perhaps demand things from the liberal media. We see a lot of stories covering the separation of church and state in web media, like Salon, like Raw Story, other more progressive places, Huffington Post. But on television, we're pretty much invisible except for on Fox News. And of course, Fox News only puts atheists up in order to demonize them. Again, from the article, when the Fox News talk show host Bill O'Reilly referred to him and American atheists as a merry band of fascists, Silverman came close, but only close to losing his cool. Fascist? Fascist? You call me a fascist? Absolutely, replied O'Reilly, showing no regard for the definition of fascism. I am a patriot, sir, fired back Silverman, who's taking the craziest notion that everyone in this country is equal and that the government has to treat everyone fairly. That's fascism? O'Reilly tried to talk over him and misstate Silverman's argument, but Silverman retained his sang-froid and actually out-bullied O'Reilly. Quote, "We demand equality from the government, and it's our constitutional right, and you should be demanding." Yeah, really glad he does go on Fox and he is a spokesperson, because it's not some kind of crazy, out of left field notion, the idea that a secular government should not take a position on religion. That's kind of the definition of secular. And the hard right's inability to understand the basic concepts in English and use terms correctly is part of the problem I see in terms of the Trump movement, people using terms and putting people into categories where they really don't belong, and name calling and accusing people of things, positions they don't hold, accusing them of being a part of a political movement that when they're not. It's all down, in some ways, part of it is down to not understanding what words mean in English. Moving on, here's another facepalm moment that came up through my Google blah blah blah, what do you call that, the alerts that I bring up every week. And this is a chastity site. It's looking to raise money in order to launch a secular, which they have to define for people, non-religious version of their Chastity Project, because they want to bring the message of purity to young people in public schools. I'll tell you a little bit more about this organization as I go forward. It's a ministry of stewardship. This is from its About page. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and they believe everything in our life is a gift that has been entrusted us by God to help others. And the Chastity Project itself believes young people play a pivotal role in new evangelization, and therefore invites them to launch chastity projects within their schools and churches to promote the good news of purity to their peers. As Pope Francis said, "Do you know what the best tool is for evangelizing the youth? Another young person." And so therefore, they are looking to promote the virtue of chastity so that individuals can see God and be free to love. Seems to me that this is something we should keep our eye out, because this is their attempt to put a veneer of secularism over a religious position about what people's behavior should be based on religious beliefs before marriage, not in order to spread medically accurate information on human sexuality and how to take care of yourself your sexual health, how being aware of the risks to your sexual health, and the not the consequences, like sex is scary, but understanding that there are consequences to having sex and how do you protect yourself from them so that you can make wise choices over the course of your life. And I would hope that if this does get off the ground, that's something that the Freedom from Religion Foundation and other groups would be keeping an eye on, to make sure that they're not using this secular veneer in order to smuggle in the message of Jesus into public schools. All right, moving on. Here is another facepalm moment. This article is building on, there's a controversy that happened at Wheaton College where a woman professor in the political science department, I believe, made the very radical statement based on accurate historical facts that Muslims and Christians worship the same God. And if you actually look at the history of Islam and the idea of monotheism, where Muhammad went and studied with Jews and studied the Old Testament and saw Christians as being, Jesus as being one of the prophets, this idea that somehow Muslims and Christians don't worship the same God, to me is ridiculous. This controversy erupted when a political science professor, a Christian, and the only Black woman tenured at the university, wore a hijab, I believe. She donned a hijab in order to show solidarity with Muslims, and saying that Muslims and Christians are both people of the book. This is a phrase used in the Quran to describe Jews, Christians, and Muslims. But not everyone thought her statement was so benign. The post prompted the college administrator on Tuesday to place her on administrative leave for violating the school's statement of faith, a document all faculty members must affirm each year. So much for freedom of religion, huh? I guess in a private Christian university, you have no freedom of religion. But that being said, the next day, about 100 people protested a sit-in at the college president's office, protesting her suspension, and basically they've also launched a petition calling for her to reverse their move, and has received more than 2,000 signatures. So on the one hand, it's totally a dick move and totally a facepalm moment, but there are sensible people there who are stepping up to the task of calling out the administration and challenging bigotry within the Christian community. The Blaze is still on this topic of hotel Bibles and being, for some reason, offended that the Freedom from Religion Foundation is noting that the Bible itself calls for the slaughter of non-believers. That is part of the text, and on this basis of genocide and basically, calling for the death of infidels, that hotels shouldn't put the Bible in hotel rooms so they don't offend their guests. I won't read the whole article. You can always go and check it out, but I will bring this bit to your attention. The debate over hotel Bibles touched off after the Freedom from Religion Foundation began asking hotel chains to remove Bibles from the rooms, citing content within the book that calls for killing non-believers. Numerous faith leaders quickly reacted to the claims of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, calling their antics mindless protest. Dan Barker responded to these challenges by listing Bible verses that call for the death of non-believers, and proclaimed that his upcoming book, God, the Most Unpleasant Character in All Fiction, will document dozens of biblical God-ordained genocide, bloodthirsty ethnic cleansing, infanticide, filicide, and angry pyromaniacal destruction of whole cities and cultures. As for the faith leaders who pushed back against the notion that the Judeo-Christian scriptures call for killing non-believers, apostates, gays, stubborn sons, and women who transgress biblical double standards, Barker said that they were merely trying to explain away the atrocities. Yeah, he's right. I don't need to convince you guys that facts, we know they're facts just by observing them. All right, and then the last thing that I guess we're moving on now, this is a sort of a, did you know about this? Here's a thing you should know about. Following on from the Wheaton College controversy, this piece in NPR asks the question, do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? People here on this channel, if you're watching this, you probably already know the answer to this, because atheists tend to be quite well educated on religious history, having been confronted with a lot of claims from religious people, so we tend to self-educate on this issue. But this it might be interesting for you to pass along to someone who doesn't know it, or to bookmark it yourself. Sorry, I keep hitting the right click button when I meant to do the left click button. And if you want to listen to the story and check it out, or if you aren't entirely sure of the whole history, NPR does a great job from a very neutral standpoint that just, reports things as they are. All right, I'm going to wrap up this episode of Facepalm Moments of the Week with a few good news stories. This came out on this 18th of December, this research by the Pew Research Center, that most U.S. Christians are becoming increasingly accepting of homosexuality. And I don't know if I've formally stated this, I know I've said it in the comments a few times, but to me, the issue of homophobia, confronting homophobia in the Bible, in the biblical text and biblical norms, is the 21st century challenge in a similar way to the way that biblical slavery and acceptance of those norms and practices were the challenge of Christianity in the 19th century. So there is I think a real cultural shift that has started that will result in people dismissing the notion of homophobia as being immoral and untenable and unacceptable, in a similar way to the way that slavery, even though it's in the Bible and it's regulated and it's described how you're supposed to go about it and who can be slaves and who can't be slaves and how slaves can be free and how they can be kept for life, even though clearly slavery is condoned by the writers of the Bible on behalf of their God, the way that homophobia is condoned by the writers of the Bible on behalf of their God. People are going to choose to not take those passages seriously, and hopefully within 100 years, people will say, well, yeah, it's in there, but God never really meant for there to be homophobia. And to show, I put in this extra slide because in the previous one, you can't really see the trend. This is over a 7-year period. And what you can see is that there's been, depending on which denomination they looked at, the coefficient has, the trend line is starker. The coefficient would be bigger, I guess you would say, if you're doing a regression. You can see Catholics in 2007, on average, 58% thought that homosexuality should be accepted by society. In the most recent poll, that's up to 70%. For mainline Protestants, they went from 56 to 66. Orthodox Christians went from 48 to 62. On average, all Christians, if you aggregate them and average out, went from 44% support to 54%. That's where they get the more than half number. Then you get historically Black Protestant churches going from 39 to 51%. That's a really big trend line upwards. Evangelical Protestants and Mormons are both going up. And you can see that even Jehovah's Witnesses, who are the most homophobic, biblically conservative, take your pick of whatever phrase you prefer, even that trend is going up. If you want to read more about this, then please go ahead and do so. I think one thing that is I want to bring out is to link this specifically with the decline of religiosity in the United States, and it was this paragraph in particular that I wanted to pull out for you. Amid a changing religious landscape that has seen a declining percentage of Americans who identify as Christian, a majority of U.S. Christians, 54%, now say that homosexuality should be accepted rather than discouraged by society. While this is still considerably lower than the shares of religiously unaffiliated people, 83%, and members of non-Christian faiths, 76%, who say the same, the Christian figure has increased by 10 percentage points since we conducted a similar study in 2007. It reflects a growing acceptance of homosexuality among all Americans, from 50% to 62% during the same period. Among Christians, this trend is driven partly by younger church members who are generally more accepting of homosexuality than their elder counterparts. And then finally, I want to bring your attention to this story, the top 9 atheist wins of 2015. I think it would have been more accurate to say the top 9 US atheist wins of 2015, because it doesn't really, it's not particularly international. And while I appreciate Tom, is it Bogiani, whatever this guy's name is, I'm sorry, I don't do Italian, that's horrible. I'm sure I just slaughtered his name. The double G-I really threw me off there. But he picked things like the Duggars and the lady Kim Davis, and honestly, I think he could have done a slightly better job of doing facepalm moments of the week. I see legal challenges all the time going on about atheists having to defend the separation of church and state in the courts from Christians who are trying to put up their religious beliefs in public spaces, or alternatively expecting the taxpayers to fund the defense of their religious plaques or practices in public places, which to me is an abuse of taxpayer money. So I don't know, if you guys are interested, maybe you can put up your idea of what the top atheist wins of 2015 were. Go ahead and nominate some events that were happening, and then I might collect you, if I get enough of you guys to do this, I'll collect your responses and I'll do what my viewers said would be the top 10 stories or top 9 stories of 2015. And that's going to be it, so I'll stop sharing here. Hey, oh, I've also got to get my screen out so I can make sure everyone can see me. Right, and that was it. So if you are interested in giving some ideas what you think that the big atheist wins were for 2015, it could be in the US, could be out of the US, could be, you know, yeah, anywhere in the world, then please submit your ideas below. And if at least 3 people do it, or if one person comes up with 3 ideas, then I'll go ahead and we can do an end of the year Winters sub-channel people who nominations for the big highlights of the atheist calendar. And that is going to be it for Facepalm Moments of the week. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did and you're not a subscriber, I invite you to subscribe. And I guess that all that is left to be said is that I've been Kristi. You've been awesome. We'll see each other soon, because I'm going to do a lot of video making this week. Have a good night, or a good day, depending on what time it is where you are, and I'll talk to you later.